Hi everyone. We're going to deal some more with Sundar Singh and his background. We're still in the introduction, which gives us some of his biographical information. Sundar Singh's childhood, his training in the religions of India, prepared him for the work that God would give him to do. And I see here again similarities with the Apostle Paul and his background and his education, both secular and religious, training him for the work that he was to do. So first we'll read a little bit about Sundar Singh's background and how it prepared him for what he was to do. Throughout India, devout people consider the way of the itinerant Sadhu, which is holy man, to be the highest form of religious devotion. So much so that sadhus are generally welcome in every village. Unlike priests and other formal religious leaders, they can move freely among all castes. Throughout his life, Sundar Singh maintained the highest respect for the familiar expressions of devotion he had grown up with: Hindu and Buddhist, Sikh and Muslim. Still, the intense, mystical encounter that had led to his conversion left him forever changed and gave him an unwavering dedication to Christ. Thus, although he never criticized any religious practice that was sincerely observed, he was always ready to relate how Jesus had touched and transformed him. For him, Jesus was the truth, the completion and fulfillment of the deepest human longings for inward and outward peace. And it was unthinkable to keep Jesus to himself. It was for this reason alone that he wandered for months, even years, at a time across the Indian subcontinent, braving the elements and enduring the attacks of anti-Christians. "I am not worthy to follow in the steps of my Lord," he once explained. "But like him, I want no home, no possessions. Like him, I will belong to the road, sharing the suffering of my people, eating with those who will give me shelter, and telling all people of the love of God." As a sadhu, Sundar Singh found a ready welcome in most of the places he stayed, though reactions varied when it was discovered that he was a follower of Jesus. Christian sadhus had professed their faith in India for hundreds of years, ever since the time of the Apostle Thomas, who supposedly founded the first church there. But they were always an unpopular minority. So now I thought maybe we could read a little bit of the Apostle Paul's story and the similarities again to Singh in his preparation and how he used it in his ministry. In Acts 17 we have the account of Paul being in Athens and his preaching work there. So starting at verse 16 to verse 31. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day, with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. They thought resurrection was another god. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. He is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them, and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. Excuse me. So here I see Paul doing like Sundar does, respecting people, being respectful to their beliefs, and trying to find ways in which he can find a common ground with them. At the beginning of this reading, we saw that he was distressed, greatly distressed, or disturbed, I think some of the versions say, because he was in a city full of idols. So for someone with a Jewish background, this is going to be very distressing. But when he starts to speak to them, you would not know that he was disturbed or distressed by what he saw around him. He finds in the very thing that is a problem something that he can speak to them about. It's obvious these people are religious, he says. They are concerned about worship. So he finds the key to speaking to them, and at the same time shows great respect. At one point he even introduces something that would be familiar to them, their own poets, and he uses that also as a means of speaking to them about the gospel. So too often I think we neglect that. We're not good apologists, as I believe Sundar was, and as I believe Paul was a good apologist. He found an area where he could speak to them with respect. So I would say this sometimes when I listen to people who've come out of the Watchtower, they feel they wasted their time because perhaps they were a long time in the Watchtower. But I think we can look at it differently if we look at the examples of Sundar and the Apostle Paul. It may be that what we think of as a negative experience is really training for some work that God has for us to do in the future. I think of an experience I had when we visited England one time. We met a lovely couple, and she told me that she had trained. She suddenly decided, out of the blue, with no real reason, to switch job careers. I forget what she was doing. I think she was working in an office, and she decided to go into caregiving as a work. And it turned out that her husband ended up having a very tragic accident, whereby that training that fit her for caregiving allowed her to be the caregiver for her own husband. She was trained to do a specific job in her future. David and I have tried to use our experience of having been Jehovah's Witnesses for many years to help Jehovah's Witnesses, initially to help Christians help Jehovah's Witnesses. In our first leaving the Watchtower, that was what we did. We tried to instruct and train Christians to know the minds of witnesses so that they could help them. And now we're finding that this is a new avenue for us where we can help ex-witnesses through the channel, and witnesses, whoever is listening to our videos. We thank you. I'm going to link 2 videos. The first one is called Culture and Manners, Taste and Boredom, Cult of the Slob. The name intrigued me. It is based on a book by Richard Taylor, and David did this one, and I would say it's a must-watch, especially for the time period we're living in. It has much that would be useful to us at this time. The second video is JW's Are You Commanded to Preach or to Answer?